Okay, welcome everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending where you are. My name's Badger. I'm going to be one of the hosts for today. I'm originally from the UK, but I'm now based here in so-called Canada, in what we call Vancouver, for the Save Old Growth campaign. And I'll pass it to Elise, your other host.
Hello, I'm Alize. I'm from France, from Dernière Génération, and I'll be co-hosting this little session with Badger. And so yeah, so should we start? Everyone is ready to start? Yay! Okay, cool. So today's session is going to be about getting inspired, reconnecting with the latest science and scientific themselves. And always a chance to connect with other human beings who are doing this important and challenging work around the world. We'll be hearing a personal story from Carmen and Handy, who are like in the car right now. And then we're going to talk with Kyle and Mike, who are scientifics, and we're going to follow that by a Q&A. And then we're going to have John He, who just started a hunger strike today. And finally, we'll have some breakout rooms. So this session will be like around an hour. And I think everyone, you can change your name to the campaign, if you have time and before we all start. And if we're starting now. So Carmen and Andy, do you wanna head first and just like what you're doing and you're on the road, how you feeling?
Yeah, so I'll let Carmen speak. Carmen.
Okay, I'm feeling quite anxious. Not as anxious, more anxious than I was last week when I did my first action with Violet, the two of us with our support team. Holding up the traffic as it enters Sydney Harbour Bridge. But it was wonderful. It was really good. It felt like absolute teamwork to get there, stop the traffic, hold our banners, and it was in a place that was a little bit obscure. So the police took a long time to come. So we were able to hold the road for quite a long time until they came, and it felt powerful is actually how I felt. I felt I hadn't been anxious before. I think I'm a bit more anxious today, just knowing what's probably going to happen. However, I'm trying to hold on to that feeling of doing something meaningful that causes attention, that gets attention, and that hopefully will be effective in getting our demands met. Because I feel like I'm living in a madhouse, really. I feel like Australia's mad. We have a mad government. No one seems to be, even though the sort of reports say that 75% of Australians are concerned about climate change. I don't think 75% are concerned enough to actually demand something. So I feel I have to take up the banner to speak loudly, especially for the people who can't speak for themselves. So, yep, I'm happy to be doing this, and I feel very supported by not only Andrew, but by all the wonderful people who have strong feelings and are part of this wonderful team of Fireproof Australia. So, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say.
And Carmen didn't comply with the police, didn't give their name, spent what? The first arrest?
30 hours.
Spent 30 hours in custody. And then pled not guilty because they said she blocked the Sydney Harbour Bridge, but she wasn't on the Sydney Harbour Bridge. It was near it, but that's technically not what happened.
So technically I'm breaking my bail conditions. The only bail condition they gave me was to report once a week. But then and I didn't have my glasses, so I couldn't read what I was signing. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have signed it, that I can't do another action. So here I am today, being bolshy.
And yeah, we are literally driving to our point of excitement for today. We've got 5 people ready to sit on the road in about 20 minutes time. So this will be our fourth weekly disruption, trying to build some momentum before our concentrated action period in around the start of April. But it's been pretty fun. So we're going in underground car park, might lose reception. Love you all very much.
And I forgot to present themselves. So that was Andy, for a coordinator of a campaign, and his mom, Carmen, a retired nurse. So I forgot about saying that. I think it's kind of cool.
Awesome. That's so amazing to see on the road action live. You just keep us on Zoom for the whole thing. We can all be cheering you on. So awesome. Yeah, if they're gonna lose thing, then we'll say thank you everyone to Andy and Carmen, and let them get on with their action. Thank you for giving your time and your car ride for us. We're also going to do a few announcements and shout outs to other people. So yeah, huge shout out to Australia, absolutely smashing it. We want to give a shout out to Just Stop Oil, or the Just Stop Oil youth campaign specifically, who made it onto the red carpet at the BAFTAs today. I've already seen that was in the Guardian and is like blowing up on Twitter. So that's getting huge amounts of attention, and calling on all these celebrities and wealthy people to start using their voice and their platform to support what we're doing. And I also want to give a shout out and thanks to Henning. I'm not sure if they're here today, from Germany, who completed their hunger strike, and they've been really helpful with us planning our own one, and actually came on a talk which we did to people who are interested here. So yeah, really great to have this community sharing their knowledge and their experiences, and like to speak to someone that's like, we got a win, we did this, is great. So exciting to see some of these things happening. So we have the pleasure of introducing Kyle from Scientists Rebellion. Kyle is going to give us a little talk. The latest IPCC report came out recently with some pretty big statements, and so yeah, Kyle's going to give us some updates on that, and then we will have some chance for some Q&A after. So over to you, Kyle. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Badger, and thanks everyone for being here. It looks like the Australian guys have gone, but I'm actually from Australia. I'm living in Germany at the moment, but I would have expressed sincere gratitude and thanks and solidarity with the guys going onto the bridge in Australia. I've always wanted to go and block that bridge. I'm actually from Sydney, so I'm super proud that they're doing that, super happy. I wish I could join them, but my work at the moment is here. So yeah, I'll jump right into it. So I guess I'll give one or two thoughts on my sort of personal situation. I'm an environmental scientist. I was working in air pollution and noise pollution and contaminated land for 3 years or 4 years. And then I moved to Germany and started in renewable energy. And I've got to admit that whole time, I was very much stuck in this sort of scientific space of thinking that I was doing my bit and living up to my responsibilities just purely by working on research papers and producing assessments. But at the end of the day, I was sitting in meetings with big companies talking about what they're going to do to fuck up the world, basically, and the governments and so on, sort of pretending that they were doing some sort of responsible assessment of the projects. But I mean, they would get approved if the money was there. That's all that really mattered. And to break out of that space wasn't easy. But I remember reading a paper at the start of last year that sort of really connected with me. And I spent sort of the next 2 or 3 days, 2 or 3 nights actually after that paper. It sounds a bit appalling to say it, but I couldn't go to work. I was waking up like several nights in a row in the middle of the night, and then I just had to go for a walk. You know, I just walked into the forest and sort of found a nice spot overlooking, like from a cliff overlooking the forest, and just cried and was like touching, you know, the trees and stuff. And as someone that studied science for 6 or 7 years and then worked in the field for 4 or 5 years, you know, you don't get that emotional connection. You're almost trained out of it. And I think that's something that's a lot of scientists have found really hard to break out of. And we're starting to see it now. So that's what our organization, Scientists Rebellion, is trying to do, is get scientists to act in a meaningful way in parallel with their research. What's the point of sitting behind your desk, writing the 50th study telling us how fucked we are, and if you're not going to draw a line somewhere and say, right, if the governments are not going to act in line with the facts and the truth as we understand it, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be, you know, a reasonable response. And we're still not seeing that. So, and that's a perfect segue into the IPCC report that came out last week. So, you know, this was actually leaked in I think it was May or June last year. And then we leaked the third part of the report as Scientists Rebellion. We leaked that in September, in August. The main reason we leaked our part of the report is because that's the part that deals with what measures the governments can take to bring emissions down. And if, you know, we've seen in basically all of the reports in the past, when it gets to this stage, all of the science and the scientific framing is done. Then the governments come and try and repick the wording in the summary for policymakers, which is sort of the main summary of every part of the knowledge in the report. So we leaked that to stop the governments being able to manipulate the real hard truth of the report. And obviously you can imagine if the scientists know that when they write these summary for policymakers, it's going to be changed by the governments. If they write it, you know, in a certain way anyway, they would dumb their language down. They don't do that in the main report, but the main report is 4,000 words. Not many people actually delve deep into the real report. The IPCC tends to be conservative in all their assessments anyway, which most people are probably aware of. So we leaked that report. So the first reason is to try and show that, you know, here's what it looked like when the scientists were finished. Then when it gets published in April this year, people will have a chance to compare what our governments are trying to do with the truth, as the scientific community has said that it is, and what the policymakers are trying to get out of it to keep their hidden agendas, or not even hidden agendas really, their agendas running. The second reason we leaked it is because, as you've probably seen 2 weeks ago, it just gets overtaken by whatever the latest shitfuck that our governments have caused is. At the moment, it's Ukraine. Last year, when the other one came out, it was coronavirus. In 2018, 2019, it was God knows what else, Trump and all the rest of it. These reports get forgotten after 18, 24, maybe 36 hours if you're lucky. So we hope to try and, by leaking it, also show that the scientific community were not willing to cooperate anymore, or parts of the scientific community were not willing to cooperate anymore. Now, I don't have the ability to share my screen. If someone wants to give me that, I can quickly sort of give my 2 or 3 minute summary of the report that came out last week. I can start without that permission anyway. So some of the key phrases is, the worst is yet to come, affecting our children's and our grandchildren's life much more than our own. We need transformational change, operating on processes and behaviors at all levels: individual, community, business, institutions, and governments. We must redefine, I can share my screen now, hang on a second. Can you all see that? We must redefine our way of life and consumption. This can't be done by individual lifestyle changes or, you know, tiny, small legal changes like single-use plastics, even if those things may be important. Current levels of adaptation, so what we're currently doing to mitigate these risks, will be inadequate to respond to future climate risks. Losses of habitat and resilience, overexploitation, water extraction, pollution, invasive native species, and dispersal of pests and diseases have shattered Earth's equilibrium. Life on Earth can recover from drastic climate shift by evolving into new species and creating new ecosystems, but humans cannot. Adaptation costs for Africa. So this is this whole climate change isn't that bad yet. It's already fucking terrible in the global south, right? I'm from Australia. I mean, Australia's now sort of getting the first glimpses of that, but it's already been fucking terrible in Kenya, Madagascar, for quite some time now. We're talking about, this report mentioned the figure 3.3 to 3.6 billion people are now at acute risks at the moment as we have this call from the drastic effects of climate change. The adaptation for costs for Africa are projected to increase by tens of billions of dollars every year with warming greater than 2 degrees. Warming greater than 2 degrees, according to, for example, James Hansen, one of the most respected climate scientists in history, is all but an assured thing unless we have a climate revolution, which is what Scientists Rebellion is trying to advocate for. And I think most of your groups are at least on board with. The final sort of main phrase that I want to pick out is that the prolonged warming of it, even beyond 1.5 degrees Celsius, could produce progressively serious, centuries-long, and in some cases, irreversible consequences. Even at 1.5 degrees of Celsius of warming, conditions will change beyond many organisms' ability to adapt. That's conservative IPC scientific language speak for going beyond 1.5 degrees. It is not a government target the way it's often presented in the media. It's a physical scientific reality that if we go to temperatures beyond that, we are facing genuine collapse of our ecosystems and our societies. This is not, as it's projected in the media, some sort of, oh, it'll get a bit worse. No, it starts to get cascadingly worse. The Chatham House report last year said that we've got less than a 1% chance of staying under 1.5 degrees and a less than 5% chance of staying under 2 degrees. Less than 5% chance. These are the kind of numbers we would never take risks like that with our kids. We would never put them in a plane and say, you've got a 30% chance, for example, some of the budgets that the IPCC talks about, which are extremely conservative and have a number of negative emissions technologies, so carbon capture, which doesn't exist at scale. A lot of these budgets talk about 33% chances, 66% chances of staying under a certain number. We would never take a risk like that. It's insane that our governments are purporting that that's taking reasonable action. It just came out from the International Energy Agency, I think on Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday this week, that emissions just rose by their highest level in history, and the current level of CO2 emissions is the highest it's ever been. This is in rebound with still some countries with lockdowns. So I guess to summarize, some of the points I wanted to pick out about why Scientists Rebellion is now growing quite successfully is we're mobilizing just as much in the global south as we are in the global north. Most organizations are not and cannot achieve that. The way we're doing that is we're centering both female voices and in our communication and in our structures, and we're centering global south voices and trying to give them as much credibility and attention as we can. And that is a cultural shift that needs to happen. There's a couple of cultural shifts that need to happen. I'll just finish off on this point. Climate change is lastly, it is a structural issue, and it is a social issue in that 42 or 44% of emissions come from the 10% richest people. 42 to 44% of emissions from the 10% richest people. 50% of the entire global population are responsible for less than 12% of emissions. I mean, the numbers are just staggering. There was a new paper that came out this month in Nature saying it would increase emissions by less than 2% to bring every single person on Earth out of energy and food poverty. Why are we not doing that? And restricting the ability of the wealthier classes to, or the worse emitters, I should say, to have free reign of whatever emissions and private jets. Why are we not banning private jets, et cetera, et cetera? Because we've got structures that allow that behavior to be forefronted. So that where do you hear these discussions in the media? You don't. That's why we leaked the IPCC report. The next IPCC report comes out on the 4th of April. That whole week, we are going to be announcing a global scientific rebellion. We want as many scientists as we can to go on strike, to go on hunger strike, to go and occupy universities, to go and occupy libraries, to go and occupy government buildings. We want to get 200 to 300 scientists arrested across the world. I myself am going to be blocking a road, then I'll be pasting some scientific papers on government institutions, then I'm going to be spray painting a bit, and then I'm going to be doing God knows what else. And I cannot understand for the life of me why, I mean, there's this quote, everyone attributes it to Einstein. The quote is, those with the privilege to know have the duty to act. Why is the scientific community not stepping up and joining us? Because of privilege. We need to say to them, you know, what we're doing right now is fucking over the global south and then fucking over the future generations. We need to stand up, stand together, and cause a climate revolution. And I think I'll stop there. Thanks everyone for your attention.
Thank you, Carl, for this. Like, if you have any question, you can put it in the chat and we can respond to this.
Yeah, I want to say thank you so much for that, Kyle. It's so good that was so inspiring to see a scientist speaking emotionally and being fired up, and like kudos to you for taking action, and as well as kind of spreading the word and stuff and going on the road yourself. It's what it needs, is people to lead the way. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, if everyone wants to just put any questions in the chat, and then we'll read them out. He's able to lead on that in a sec. And I think Rodri has shared some of those links to some of the reports that you mentioned there as well. And you said that the report comes out on April 4th. Awesome.
Yeah, they have in the past delayed it by 1 day or so, but it's announced for the 4th. The one that just came out last week was actually, I think it was originally due on the 28th, then they moved it back 1 day and then they brought it forward again anyway.
Okay, well, if there is no questions, then we can move on to the next.
I have a question, if possible.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, I was thinking about like, I can imagine there could be some scientists that maybe are in some way interested into saying, making some disruption or opposition, but their answer may be the following answer. So yes, maybe it's cool, maybe it's the right idea, but I'm a scientist, I can do a lot if I keep my position in bringing the truth out, and if I lose my position, I cannot do it anymore. So like, for me, it's an excuse, of course, but how do you answer that? Because like I have the same problem with involving politicians, that there are some politicians in parliament in Italy that are willing maybe to go in civil resistance, but there's a lot of talking about this point. So I think it could be the same for scientists.
Yeah, thanks. Good question. We need to change our culture to one that speaks the truth and acts in line with it. And the truth is that argument might have stood up in 2008 or 2010. We're in 2022, we're heading towards fucking climate hell, and there's no point sitting around thinking that you can make a small difference with, you know, words and reports when we already have the technologies, we already have the solutions available. It's not a question of you know, authority or position or power, or well, it is a question of power, but not in that sense. It's a question of, you know, the current system is so beneficial for such we've already seen through coronavirus that the top 1% have tripled their wealth and the top 10% have doubled their wealth, whereas thousands and millions of people are completely suffering, right? So, I mean, the structures that are in place are specifically there to benefit a group of people. And we need to play that power game better. And you don't do that by sitting around in your position. I think that's the best way I could answer that. I did actually get asked this question in an interview. And I think what we said was, it's important that scientists carry out nonviolent civil disobedience, such as breaking laws and rules and leaking documents, because all conventional ways of making governments and the public really understand the impending catastrophe of the collapse of the global climate system have been unsuccessful. We need to recognize that truth. Emissions have increased 60% since 1990, since the governments knew that what they were doing would bring us climate hell. Emissions continue to rise, ecosystems continue to be destroyed. Scientists, even if they're not directly from the climate sciences, see very clearly the huge gap between the knowledge of the crisis and the political action or inaction. And when someone realizes that there is a fire, it is their responsibility, it is their absolute moral duty to make this danger clear to everyone so that they can get to safety before it's too late. At present, we're completely failing to do that. Thanks for the question.
Okay, and then we have Hanward. You had a question. Do you want to?
Yeah, this is a question for Kyle. Kyle, I just sent you a link to a story that just broke this morning from Biomass Canada. And aside from the heinous expansion of the tar sands that Canada's notorious for, we also are liquidating our forestry base, our carbon sinks, both old growth forests as well as tree farms. We've had some 200 mills closed, and now we're diverting under the ruse of getting off of fossil fuels and a just transition. We are now sending ship raw logs to Asia and wood pellets to the to Europe. And I'm just wondering, how did this ever happen that they're quoting the IPC report as biomass burning as being a great way to transition away from fossil fuels? I'm just wondering what the hell you might want to say about that.
Another great question. Yeah, thanks. So obviously that situation is fucking awful. Biomass can play a role. It's not necessarily completely destructive the way that our modern societies are tending to do ever more. I mean, for example, you drive around here in the country in Germany, and a lot of the farmland is being used for corn, but it's not corn to eat. It's some of it's corn for the cattle and various animal farming practices, but a lot of it is for biomass, exactly the way you mentioned, and a lot of it's just monocrops, you know, where they're spraying fertilizer and pesticides and all the rest of it, which is a further contributor to climate change itself and to the release of greenhouse gases. And I mean, coming back to the point about, you know, going into forests and you're talking about especially the old growth forests, right? Is that right? So I mean, this is another point we try and make when governments will talk about the fact that, you know, planting 1 million trees or 1 billion trees or 1 trillion trees can draw down carbon and so on. You can't remake an ecosystem. You can plant trees, and after a certain amount of time, the ecosystem will begin to form around that. But you can't remake a natural ecosystem. You can help the ecosystem to grow back in the best way it can, right? So an unsustainable use of our remaining natural resources is just as bad as, well, I mean, it's in the same sort of level as, you know, continuing to use fossil fuels and continuing our insane meat consumption practices in the West. We need to be sensible about how we use these resources, and that means obviously protecting them first and foremost, allowing them to increase and grow back. We need to bring our consumption of energy down. Wood does have a role to play in construction, as I'm aware. You know, it can be a sustainable material. It can be a positive material in the changes we need to make, but not in the practices you're talking about. Australia's got a lot of the same problems. You know, and this is again is a capitalist operation of dealing with your resources that just does not make sense, both from the climate perspective and from an individual health perspective and the health of our ecosystems, which we rely on. They are our life support systems. Thanks for your question. I hope that sort of spoke to it.
Thank you, Kyle.
Thanks.
We're going to take like the last question of Thibaut and Sasha, and then we're going to move on to the next session.
Thanks. Hey, Kyle. Hey, everyone. So we've been doing a bunch of talks talking about the conversation article about the mea culpa from three top scientists about how they basically didn't really tell the truth in Paris in 2015 about our ability to stay below 1.5 degree. And I've been doing the talk a bunch of times. And I have to admit that there's still a part of me that struggles to understand why there aren't more scientists who are just willing to, you know, to tell to the world how like the reality of like where we're at and the chances that we have of staying below this or that. And we've often talked about it in the international community that, you know, they don't want to rock the boat, that they have, you know, jobs they want to protect or whatever. But as I'm sharing it to people, I'm seeing that like there's a struggle for people to understand really why they're lying to us, especially that, you know, here in France, and I guess in many countries, we have a bunch of like renowned scientists who have been known over the last decades for being kind of like whistleblowers of saying like, you know, things are really bad, blah, 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 but they're never like, but they're still not going as far as saying like, we only have a few years left, our carbon budget is over, we're never going to stay below 1.5. So my question is like, what happens if they do that? Like, would they all just systematically get fired from their job for saying that? Like, to which extent is there such a collusion between the political and scientists to the extent that they cannot open their mouth about the fact that they're just misleading everyone into thinking it's not actually as bad as it is?
Thanks. I had an interesting experience similar to this the other day. I had a meeting with a fairly highly respected professor here in Germany, and we sort of talked about this issue and said, honest thoughts on the table, who actually here believes that 1.5 degrees is dead? And 4 out of 5 people in the meeting said yes. And the professor / scientist said yes, but because he doesn't believe that we will organize and move in the way that we need to in the time that remains. I don't know if it's as sinister as maybe you might have depicted it in your question. I don't think it is the government's saying, you know, or implying that you would lose your funding or lose your job if you say X or Y. I think it is genuinely a cultural issue within the sciences that you don't want to tell the truth because of rocking the boat, as you mentioned. You know, like how often do you hear scientists actually say what is going on in the global south? You know, we're talking about 30 million people a year already being on the move, or more, according to the UN, every year because of climate-related disasters. But what does on the move mean, right? I mean, Roger Hallam is pretty good at talking about this, right? It means people are getting fucking destroyed, and we need to be honest about that fact. But people that are in these high positions seem to have developed a culture or a space where they think it's acceptable to not say what they mean. And the way Scientist Australia wants to change that is by, you know, being as open and honest as we can, and doing direct action. That you can't say to a scientist, get a job. You can't say to a scientist, you know, all the stupid things that maybe you guys encounter when people talk to you on the street. Study harder, go and do something useful. We've tried all that shit. It's a matter of power and emotion, and you've got to connect with people in a way that makes it real for them, that this shit isn't about polar bears and whales and trees and ice. It's about, you know, real people's fucking lives, the ability to eat, you know, the ability to live their happy, comfortable lives as we've known it in the Holocene. The Holocene's dead. It's the same issue with, you know, atomic power. People still think that atomic power is a solution now because it might have been a solution in the 1980s. I'm not going to go too far into that, but you know, trying to build centralized power facilities going into a time where we might have complete climate breakdown is just insane. You would never take a risk like that. This is what I was trying to get at again with the budgets in the IPCC, talking about, you know, a 40% chance or 33% chance of staying under 1.5 when the science has been clear for a number of years that going over 1.5 and even sitting around 1.5 degrees already engages some of those tipping points we've been talking about. We need to say that rationally and not be, you know, too overly dramatic about it, but also say it with a way that connects to people. And that's where the scientific community and the media, frankly, have completely failed. Thanks for your question.
Thank you so much for that, Kyle. And that actually leads on really well into the next thing. So we're going to go back into breakout rooms and kind of just have a chance to kind of like connect on like, what does that science mean? So kind of like we're going to allow 8 minutes in the breakout room. So kind of like what stuck with you most, what's that emotional meaning for you or for your country, or what kind of thing that, and then kind of like discuss some ideas of like, yeah, how can we communicate this? Is there any of those hard hitting lines that you want to start using? So I'm going to put them in the chat for everyone, and we're going to go back into the breakout rooms for 8 minutes. We might go a little over the hour overall, but obviously if people want to leave after that, that's fine. And then when we come back, if anyone has any like really kind of key things they want to communicate, we'll have a little bit of time for that. So maybe allocate one person in your group that would be happy to speak. So yeah, we're going to go back into the breakout rooms, and we'll be back in 8 minutes. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Sorry for the mess up on the breakout rooms, but yeah, hopefully your second breakout room created some good discussion with those questions. We'll just allow like a few minutes, just if anyone wants to raise their hand, if they had like a really good point or something that came up in their breakout room that they want to feel is really useful for everyone to share, and then we'll move on. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, either digitally or in real life. Howard, yeah, can I make one quick point from your room?
Yeah, I think what we heard in our group was, as a takeaway, is that Kyle made it very, very clear what's at stake. And what we need as we go into the April rebellion is scientists not distancing themselves from us, but actually saying, no, they're doing what's absolutely needed at this point in time. And so we need to have that collaboration entrenched for April, or we're going to be hung out to dry to some degree by our governments. I think we're all, suffering. We suffered Trump fatigue, pandemic fatigue, and now we're dealing with a war. But if what I get from Kyle is all the world's pandemics and wars together are pale in comparison to what's coming, and that's why we need the scientists to express that now.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Howard, and good to see you. Thanks for being here. Does anyone else have anything they want to share that was particularly poignant from their breakout room? Kyle.
Yeah, there was one more thing I didn't mention, and actually it got buried in the report, so I must admit when I first read through and then started reading some other articles, it passed me by. There was a phrase somewhere buried in the report that said, by 2100, just with business as usual, not in a worst case scenario, business as usual, 2100, 50 to 75% of humanity could be living in places that are above the livable threshold. This is no longer, affecting someone somewhere. This is everyone everywhere. It almost, obviously not literally, but just thought I'd leave that truth bomb there at the end. Let's get on with it. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you, Kyle. And quickly, if we, come across any scientists or engaging with universities or things like that, what is the best way for them to get involved and be part of Scientist Rebellion and get in touch with yourself or others?
Yeah, thanks. So we're on all the major social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube with Scientist Rebellion. If you just Google Scientist Rebellion, I think we're the top hit. And yeah, a lot of our best information is on our website, including a good summary of the climate crisis, obviously, and information about how to get involved, even low-level actions, even for people just at uni, can organize occupation strikes and even do paper pastings if they're up for it. Plenty of good material on the website.
Amazing. Thank you, Kyle. Elise, over to you.
Yes, so now we're going to hear about John, who's from Declare Emergency and just started a hunger strike today. So reach out to you.
Hi, everyone. I hope it's not too loud. I'm out here. I'm heading towards the White House right now to take a picture of day one. So today I'm going on indefinite hunger strike. I'm with a campaign in DC called Declare Emergency. And we're demanding that Biden declare a climate emergency and stop all extraction on federal and indigenous land. But if we get one of those demands met, then we'll stop disruption, at that time. And so the reason I decided to go on this hunger strike is that I just feel like I've tried everything else. And I've been arrested 9 times. I spent about a week in jail. I spent about 10 nights in jail overall. And I've been telling my story to folks. And it is so difficult to get people here to pay attention. And even people who are like activists, it's really hard for folks to see that we need to step it up from performance. I mean, we're facing the fucking collapse of everything that we've ever known and ever cared about. And it's a crime that we're not stepping it up. So I've decided to go on hunger strike either until Biden declares a climate emergency or until 39 people agreed to join us on the roads in DC at the beginning of April. We're going to start blocking roads on April 1st through the 14th. And so I don't know what else to do to get my fellow Americans to pay attention and take our fucking responsibility seriously, because the people who are suffering right now are the people least responsible for this. And it's just such a crime. I wanted to share just a quick quote from a BBC article that some folks here might have read in August of last year during the start of the Madagascar climate-induced famine, or in the middle of it. And it says, crops have failed and now people are relying on insects and cactus leaves for food. I clean the insects as best I can, but there's almost no water, said Tamaria, a mother of 4 who goes by one name. My children and I have been eating this every day now for 8 months because we have nothing else to eat and no rain to allow us to harvest what we have sown, she added. Today we have absolutely nothing to eat except cactus leaves, said Bull, a mother of 3, sitting on the dry earth. She said her husband had recently died of hunger, as had a neighbor, leaving her with 2 more children to feed. What can I say? Our life is all about looking for cactus leaves again and again to survive. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And I'll say, to my fellow Americans, and that, I mean, we need to take this seriously. It's horrific what's happening. And I just want to send my love and solidarity to everyone on this call that's doing such incredible work. You all have inspired me. And we have a lot of power here in America and around the world. And you guys doing what you're doing inspires us to take action and whip us into shape. So anyways, yeah, I'll check there.
Thank you very much, John. I think there was a hand up. I don't know if there is it anymore. Should we go out and do the checkout rooms for now? Yeah. So we can go on what we learned so far and how we're feeling right now, and what are we going to do next with this information and learning.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope we had a good chance to connect again with people, and yeah, start to build some of these relationships so that moving forward, you have people in these other countries which you can just shoot a signal message to. I'm sure lots of you were on the Global Vanguard chat. So yeah, we're coming to the close. We went a little bit over time, but I hope everyone still found the session really useful. Big thank you again to Kyle and to John and to Australia, to Andy and Carmen for sharing. In terms of next events, there is going to be one on kind of resilience and courage, but you'll receive an email about that. And then the next Skillshare is going to be on Sunday, 27th of March, 8 p.m. GMT. Check your emails again. We found some are going into the spam folder. So maybe check your junk, and but it's the same registration link as always. And as a close, it's always nice if we can all say goodbye in your own language as we sign off here. So 3, 2, 1, everyone unmute and say goodbye.
Bye. À bientôt.
Samen, macht's gut.
Het is zo fijn. Ciao.
Ade.
Tomorrow.
See you later.
Oh, so I said ciao.
Me too.
Dobranoc.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.